Puppy is my abnormal classmate. On the day I got together with Keith, he put a knife to Keith's neck. In my previous life, I loved Keith deeply. It was only some time after marriage that I realized I was just a substitute. He and his first love conspired to take away the family property that I had worked so hard to earn and drove me out of the house. In the end, Puppy couldn't save me even though he spent a lot of money when I fell terminally ill due to overwork. He went crazy and smashed Keith's home and company and killed them to avenge me. When I opened my eyes, I went back to 3 years ago when Keith and I were deeply in love. Yvonne, cook a meal today. I'll bring clients home to eat. Love you, baby. It was a message from Keith. In an instant, those disgusting memories flooded into my mind again. During college, for Keith's sake, I went to learn cooking from a chef on purpose and made all kinds of love bento and big meals for him. After getting married, since we started our business from scratch and didn't have much money, Keith said, "Yvonne, you're such a good cook. In the future, I'll just bring clients directly to our home. Making a meal isn't troublesome for you, and it's much cheaper than eating out. This way, we can also save more money for our business." Originally, I was taking care of all the big and small matters in the company. Coupled with cooking and doing housework, during that period in my previous life, I hardly had any rest. I often relied on some medicine to refresh myself and stay alive. And pitifully thought that Keith and I were sharing weal and woe. Now, of course, I'm too lazy to pay attention to Keith. And I also have to resist the impulse to block him directly. The second after deleting Keith's message, I received a message from Puppy. Over the years, I've deleted countless ways of contacting Puppy, but he would still use new numbers to send me messages. In my previous life, I was afraid of Puppy. I even thought he was strange and disgusting. But it was only before I died that I realized that from the beginning to the end, he was the only one who really loved me. And in the end, only he, this heinous abnormal person, had never hurt me. What was his fault? He just loved me too much. Yvonne, I'm sorry. There was something going on in the company today, so I didn't go to see you. I've already punished myself. Look, there were 2 pictures showing Puppy's 2 beaten hands with faint red bloodshot eyes. And what he meant by seeing me was to follow me, record my actions and preferences, the drinks I drank, the things I touched, and then drink the same drinks as me, use the same things as me, and even steal my garbage and take it back to worship. I remembered that when I saw this message in my previous life, I calmly blocked his new number. Later, I learned that every time I blocked Puppy, he would be very excited, because in this way, he would know that I had seen the message he sent. It seemed that read was like a kind of favor to him. I thought for a while and replied, the coffee shop on the North Street of Onching Road. Yvonne, you replied to me. Aha, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to print out what you said and stick it on the head of my bed to read every day. Unlike other abnormal people, Puppy never hides himself. So much so that I don't understand how his parents could tolerate having such a crazy son in a decent family and hand over the family business to him to manage. I looked at the person sitting upright across from me and said with a smile, "Why don't you sit beside me? Ah, is it okay?" Then, before I could answer, he rushed over like the wind and sat down close to me. His breathing obviously became rapid, not giving me a chance to change my mind at all. I took his hand and unbuttoned his coat bit by bit. His face turned red. "There are so many people here. Let's go back." "Is it okay to go back? What are you thinking about in your head?" I glanced at his chest and felt that it had obviously become a bit bigger. He follows me every day, has to manage the company, and can still find time to work out. He's really a master of time management. Thinking about you, thinking about Yvonne. He quickly glanced at me and then lowered his eyes. Looking at his well-behaved tone and the way he would do whatever I said, anyone would think that he was a harmless good citizen. Only I knew that he hadn't been so obedient before. On the day he knew that I was with Keith, he rushed to the school and almost killed Keith. In the end, I saved Keith by attempting suicide. I really did try to commit suicide. The tip of the knife cut a little bit of my skin. A little blood from my neck splashed on Puppy's face. He rushed over and hugged me like crazy, and then Keith was rescued by the police. Fortunately, I did quite well in medical courses in college and controlled the position and strength well. Otherwise, I would have died at that time, and there would have been no later events. After that, Puppy didn't force me to do anything anymore. He also let me be with Keith. Besides sending messages and following me, he seldom did other excessive things. And for many things, in order not to worry Keith, I kept them hidden from him. Now I'm taking off his coat to check his body, to check his wounds. In my previous life, when Puppy accompanied me through the last period of my life, I learned that his extreme emotions had never healed. Every time he wanted to take me away, every time he wanted to kill Keith, he would cut himself to suppress that urge. Sure enough, under the coat, Puppy's 2 arms were covered with wounds of all sizes. Some were very deep, crisscrossing each other, and there wasn't a piece of intact skin left. Ugly. Don't look. He wanted to pull it up, but I glared at him. Yvonne, believe me. I've become better. I'm not that scary anymore. The more he said it, the more guilty he felt. Looking at his appearance, I felt a heart-wrenching pain. It's okay. It doesn't matter if you're scary. Before he could react, I kissed him on the lips, and couldn't stop crying while kissing. Although I died in my previous life, I still heard about Puppy's ending. He went crazy beside me for 3 days and finally committed suicide and was buried with me. After I kissed Puppy, when he saw that I was crying, he helplessly stuck out his tongue and carefully licked the tears on my face, just like a puppy. Then he hugged me tightly, making it hard for me to breathe, but I endured it. Yvonne, do I have a chance? Does a kiss mean liking? Yes. I seem to be coaxing a child. I came here today to tell you 2 things. The first thing is, don't harm yourself. If there's anything, find me on your phone. I'll reply to you. The second thing is that I'm going to get divorced and I need your help. When he heard the second thing, his eyes lit up and he suddenly became a different person. He asked his assistant to bring a computer and carefully wrote down all the details I told him. Yvonne, why didn't you cook? If you weren't going to cook, why didn't you say something? Do you know how important this client is today? If I hadn't swallowed my pride to apologize today, this client would have run away. When I went home in the evening, I had to deal with Keith's hypocritical face. I fell asleep and didn't see your message. I replied perfunctorily. It was as if Keith had punched cotton. He seemed to suddenly realize that his attitude was too obvious. After a pause, he abruptly changed his tone. So that's how it is? Sorry, wife. At this time in my previous life, I never realized that he had never loved me. Perhaps it was because I loved him so much back then that it was too easy for him to deal with me. He hugged me as he spoke, looking as if he wanted to get affectionate. I felt a wave of nausea and pushed him away resistantly. There's something important. Let's not do this for now. I've negotiated a cooperation. An investment institution under the Xingtian Group is willing to invest in us. That's great news. Wife, our business is really going to take off. Yes, our business took off. Once you made money, you could kick me aside and support Luna. In my previous life, I was double-crossed by Keith and Luna. Firstly, some unclear photos of me were taken and presented in court, which determined that I was cheating. Secondly, most of the property was transferred abroad by Keith, and Luna received it overseas. There was less than 10% of the joint property left. To ensure sufficient working capital, we didn't even buy a house. The visible property we had was just a car worth over 100,000 yuan. Although I had already shown various symptoms in my body at that time, because I had to use my wits to fight with them for months over the division of property and the cheating issue, I didn't go for a check in time and missed the best treatment period, and my condition worsened. Calculating the time, I still had a few months before getting sick now. As long as I took proper precautions and went to the hospital regularly, I shouldn't repeat the same mistakes. Yvonne, why did he come to our home? Don't you remember what he did to me before? Of course, I knew what he had done. Didn't he just put a knife to your neck? Now I'm even more eager to do that than he was. But in order to keep up the pretense, I still hypocritically comforted Keith. He's the contact person sent by the Xingtian group. Didn't you say that we should bring clients home usually to save money? Besides, he's here to invest in us, Keith. Don't be so rude. It's been so many years since we last met. The past is long gone. It was just youthful impulsiveness. I justified Keith's behavior with a guilty yet confident air. After all, in recent years, in order not to worry Keith, I had hidden Puppy's improper behaviors very well. When Keith went to the toilet, Puppy immediately dropped all his disguises and rubbed against me. He knew that Keith was still around and that I still wanted to hide it from Keith and couldn't get angry with him. When his face suddenly got close to mine, the toilet door just closed tightly. He looked like he wanted to kiss me. His warm breath blew on my face. But in the end, he just lowered his head and kept kissing my hand. Seeing that Keith was about to come out, he was still unhurried and even put his arm around my waist. I got a bit panicked and wanted to pull my hand away, but he grabbed my hand instead. And a second before Keith came out, he suddenly got up as if he were a fly being swatted and instantly stood straight in front of Keith, who had just come out of the toilet, and said politely, "General Manager Keith, let's go to the study and talk." For the first time, I thought that his serious look was actually quite nice. Damn it, it was really charming. In the evening, Keith couldn't stop smiling as he stared at the message on the computer. The Xingtian Group had financed us with 50 million yuan and became the largest shareholder of our company. Looking at Keith's current appearance, I was extremely happy in my heart. Because he didn't know that he would forever regret this decision today. Counting the days, it was time for Luna to contact Keith. Sure enough, one day Keith suddenly said that he would be on a business trip for a few days. Probably he was going to meet Luna secretly. In my plan, Keith and Luna were going to experience everything that I had gone through. I wanted Keith to lose everything and for all of Luna's careful calculations to come to nothing. Anyway, since Keith wasn't around, I simply dropped the pretense. I called Puppy, and he immediately came to pick me up joyfully. The chauffeur couldn't keep a straight face when he saw Puppy clinging tightly to me with his crazy smile and starry eyes. In the car, Puppy repeatedly begged me to visit the place where he had lived for so many years. Out of curiosity, I agreed. "Yvonne, this is the secret garden I built for you." When I opened the door, although I was mentally prepared, I was still stunned. It was a huge, empty space without extra walls. My photos were pasted all over the walls, and there were various notes beside them for explanations. The things I had used were displayed one by one in the display cabinets, with labels attached. Directly opposite hung a huge painting. It depicted me at the age of 18, crying on the seat because my best friend had left. In the middle of the hall, there was a small bed. Puppy walked over and sat down, stroking the bed. Only then did I realize that it was the bedsheet I had thrown away 5 years ago. I've lived here for almost 15 years. Only when I look at you do I feel that I'm alive. Before I was 23, I had never asked Keith why he loved me so much. I just thought of him as an abnormal person and hoped to avoid him. Until one day, I went back to the welfare institute where I grew up. I found the dean who was in charge of me at that time, and she accidentally gave me the answer. I grew up in a welfare institute and had no parents. I didn't find my biological relatives even when I grew up. That's why when I had a terminal illness in my previous life, no parents or relatives came to take care of me. But I didn't expect that Puppy and I were from the same welfare institute. The only difference was that he quickly found his parents. In the photo frame, everyone was smiling except him, who was staring at the camera with a gloomy look. And he was in every photo of me, but I didn't know if it was a coincidence. Puppy was a child who didn't like to talk since he was little, as if he grew up in an ice cave. Back then, I heard that only you dared to approach him. Hey, when Xiaoyu came back before, she saw this photo and told me that it seemed Puppy was also in the same high school as you. Have you seen him? How is he? Puppy took me to the opposite of the house where he usually lived. He had bought 2 houses. This one was for the day when I could move in. As soon as I closed the door, I started to take off his clothes. He was very obedient, burying his head in my neck and letting me do whatever I wanted. While I was touching him, I felt something strange around his waist. What's this? I untied the hard thing and found deep marks on Puppy's waist from being tied. This is... Sister, you forgot that you once praised Kiki's good figure. Of course, I can't fall behind either. He pouted. After thinking for a while, I realized that it was a corset belt used to make the waist look thinner. How old are you? You're 30, not 13. Why don't you have any judgment at all? Can the waist be made thinner like this? Also, why did you suddenly start calling me sister? Puppy looked at me with a smile. Sister, you don't know. When I wear this belt, I don't dare to eat much usually. And the pressure works. Otherwise, why would some people become hunchbacked? It's okay as long as the bones are deformed. Anyway, sister doesn't need to know these things. It's enough that I know. He seemed to enjoy himself, and I just threw away the corset belt and didn't have the heart to scold him. After a while, I turned my back to him to get something from my bag and then said casually, "You knew that I was coming today and wore the corset belt. Were you deliberately trying to make me see it and feel sorry for you? It would be best if sister could feel sorry for me. But it doesn't matter if you don't." There was a strong hint of being a green tea, pretending to be innocent while scheming, in his words. Then I won't feel sorry for you. I casually replied perfunctorily. Then I'll cut myself more next time. Will sister feel sorry for me then? If I become lame or blind, will sister stay with me for the rest of my life? Although his tone didn't change, I still felt that there was suddenly no warmth in his words. I froze instantly and then turned around abruptly. You'd better make the wounds on your body heal quickly. I only want a healthy and useful man. Just look at how ugly the wounds on your body are. I won't want an ugly man. If you become lame, I'll leave you crawling on the roadside. If you go blind, I'll tie you up and take you to a place where no one knows you. And you'll never see me again. Did you hear that? I was really angry and said to Puppy fiercely. Yes, I heard it. He crawled over from the other end of the bed, put his upper body around my waist, buried his head in front of my stomach, and then actually started to shed tears. I thought for half a second whether I had been too fierce just now and then pulled him up and leaned over to kiss his lips. Puppy is wanted by someone. I was stunned for a moment, not knowing whether his tears were also just a trick. I didn't sleep a wink all night. Keith came back, bringing Luna with him. He introduced her to me as his friend from abroad who had just returned to China recently. Yvonne, Luna is a master of economics from a famous American university and has worked in companies in the American industry for many years. I thought that you're usually very busy in the company. In the future, for the company's affairs, let Luna help you. I smiled. A master of economics from a famous American university? Miss Luna is really remarkable. However, we're also a formal company. Please ask Miss Luna to submit a resume, and I'll arrange an interview for Miss Luna as soon as possible. After the interview, Miss Luna needs to prepare her university enrollment and graduation certificates and hand them over to the personnel department. Didn't I know Luna's background? It was only when I went back to investigate Luna later that I learned that Luna and I were in the same junior high school. But she went to a vocational high school right after junior high. Although Luna's family didn't have much money, she was envious that others could go abroad to study, change their fates, leap across social classes, and marry rich and handsome men. So she forced her parents to sell their property and went abroad to muddle along for a few years. What famous foreign university? She was just a dropout from an ordinary community college in the United States. Don't even mention managing the company or taking charge of the company's accounts. It would be good enough if she could calculate how much money she spent every day. In my previous life, she hired people with high salaries to do things for her outside, and that's how she managed to hide this. In this life, all she has left is the chance to be humiliated by me. Yvonne, there's no need for that. Miss Luna came back from abroad specifically to help us because she saw the potential of our company. What do you mean by an interview? As far as I'm concerned, we can just let Luna be the general manager directly, and you can step aside. That way, you won't be so tired every day either. I took a sip of coffee and remained silent. Luna got a bit impatient seeing that we were at a stalemate. Miss Yvonne, General Manager Keith should have the final say in this company. Since General Manager Keith has spoken, is there still room for you to say anything? Keith couldn't keep his face, but under Luna's eye signal he suddenly got some courage. Yvonne, there's no need for us to discuss this matter anymore. Luna will go directly to the company tomorrow. Don't you believe my decision? At that moment I seemed to realize how ridiculous I was in my previous life, ridiculously believing in Keith unconditionally. Of course I don't believe you. Why would you think that I believe you? The moment I said this, Keith looked at me in disbelief, because in his impression I was just the Yvonne who loved him unconditionally, loved him so much that I could protect him with my own life. Keith, ask yourself. How much have you taken care of the company's affairs except for occasionally accompanying clients during this period? Can you tell where the raw materials for our latest products are sourced from? Not to mention these. Did you read the last document carefully? Don't you know that after the Xingtian Group financed us, all the senior personnel files need to be uploaded to their side for review? Keith was left speechless by my words and stammered without being able to say anything. Hearing that her plan was likely to fall through, Luna couldn't care less about pretending to be a graduate from a famous university and turned around to pull Keith's sleeve and asked, Keith, why didn't you tell me about these things? I continued to pretend to be kind-hearted and ignorant. Miss Luna, what's the rush? Formal recruitment requires interviews. It's perfectly normal to provide academic certificates before starting work. Miss Luna has studied in the United States for so many years. Don't you know what a graduation diploma is? What a job resume is? After we parted on bad terms and returned home, Keith walked behind me and slammed the door shut. I knew that he was expressing his dissatisfaction through his actions. He thought that I would care, but I didn't care at all. I won't have dinner tonight, Keith said to me condescendingly. Oh, then don't eat it ever again. Obviously Keith didn't expect me to say that. His steps towards the bedroom suddenly stopped. Because in the past I always told him to eat properly, always brought him meals, and reminded him to eat every day. He turned around, walked to the sofa, sat down, and hugged me. Yvonne, don't you love me very much? Today's matter is just a trifle. Our relationship is still very good, right? I don't know why you're so dissatisfied with Luna, but I really brought her here for the good of our company. His appearance made it hard for me to tell. He was such a good actor. I had my own plan, so I didn't lose my temper at this time. I just pushed him away. I casually picked up my mobile phone and just then a new message popped up. It was a message from a private hospital I had visited before. Miss Yvonne, there are a large number of contraceptive and body-damaging drugs in the medications you're taking. Did you know that? I looked at Keith pacing back and forth in front of me, trying to digest this sentence. All my medications, sleeping pills, healthcare pills, and energy-boosting pills were all given to me by Keith, just because he had a famous doctor friend. In the past 4 or 5 years, every time I went to the hospital, he would ask for leave to accompany me to find the best doctors, and take care of everything. He wrote me a long list. When to take what, when to do what, item by item, it seemed full of care for me. Item by item, they were all knives stabbing into me. According to the time in my previous life, I should have been ill by now. But Dr. Tara, who was in charge of me, told me that there was no certain malignant disease, just that my body was damaged and I had to stop taking the medications. Then there was only one possibility. The illness I had was not the terminal illness that Keith said at all. I began to sort out the details bit by bit. In my previous life, 1 month after Luna joined the company, Keith told me that I had contracted an illness with a certain probability of mutating and worsening. During the first examination, the result Keith gave me was that there was no tendency of worsening for the time being, and the probability of worsening was also very low. All I needed to do was to have a good rest. However, 4 months later, when I went to the hospital alone because I couldn't bear the pain anymore, the hospital told me that my body was already very weak and that I didn't have much time left. This time, I didn't have a thorough full-body examination, so I didn't tell the hospital about the medications I had been taking all along. Because instinctively, I thought that this was just what Keith had told me before, that I had unfortunately become one of the few in tens of millions of cases where the mutation worsened, and my body quickly weakened and died as a result. Looking back, during those 3 months, because of the entanglement with Keith and Luna, I hadn't stopped taking the poison that Keith gave me. I held the medical record sheet and sat in the corridor of the hospital. I didn't understand. The person I had loved for 10 years, even if he didn't love me anymore, why did he have to put me to death? When I went to the company the next day, Luna walked past me arrogantly. It turned out that Luna had still become the deputy general manager of the company. When I saw the appointment notice, I stared at the words, "Specially approved by the senior management of the Xingtian Group," for a long time in a daze, and then I dialed Puppy's number. "Be quiet. Didn't you hear that I'm answering the phone? Yvonne, go ahead." I told Puppy about Luna's matter. An hour later, Puppy dragged a fat man in a suit and tie into the company. People above the level of small supervisors in the company gathered in a small conference room waiting for Puppy, including Luna and Keith. The notice above said that the heir of the Xingtian Group had arrived. However, Keith didn't know that the heir who came was Puppy. So when Keith bowed like a lapdog and then raised his head, what he saw was Puppy's cold and arrogant face. Although Keith couldn't keep his face, he still smiled obsequiously. Puppy's eyes quickly glanced at him and then he directly skipped over him and walked to my side. In the eyes of others, we seemed to have almost no relationship. But only I knew that just yesterday we were still secretly lying in the same bed, hugging each other and sleeping. Puppy had just sat down and hadn't spoken yet when Luna abruptly came up. In just over 10 minutes, Luna had deliberately changed her clothes into a low-cut dress. "Hello, I'm Luna, the deputy general manager of the company." Puppy didn't reply for a moment, and Luna's hand had already touched Puppy's hand, pretending to shake hands. "Luna," I couldn't help but remind her in a low voice through gritted teeth. Luna turned around and glared at me as if telling me not to interfere with her great fortune. But she didn't know that I just didn't want her to embarrass our company. Sure enough, the next second, the bodyguard beside her pulled Luna away. She fell and sat on the ground, and then Puppy stepped on her hand. Luna's pretty face twisted in an instant, looking pained but not daring to make a sound. Puppy ground his foot like this for half a minute until I couldn't help coughing, and then he stopped. Keith probably felt a sense of guilt and being cuckolded in his heart at this moment, so he didn't say a word either. The whole conference room was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Puppy walked to one side, took off the hood on the head of the fat man who had been kneeling all the time, and then threw a stack of photos on the ground. It turned out that Luna had bribed this fat man with money and her body to get the position of deputy general manager. Luna must have done many such things, let alone when she was abroad before. However, Keith was still hopelessly in love with her. He could even endure her physical entanglements with other men and could only complain that he didn't have the ability to give her the best. Perhaps this was an unshakable first love. For her sake, Keith could pretend to be friendly with me for years, drain the last bit of my energy, and then suddenly push me away, leaving me to fall into the abyss. Finally, Keith proposed divorce to me. I knew that he couldn't wait any longer. Perhaps Luna couldn't wait either. After all, she could only stay in her shabby rented house all day recently, she must be eager to see me lose everything. But they didn't know that I had also been waiting for this moment for a long time. Puppy was extremely happy. He pressed me onto the bed, and the bedboard creaked. "Is General Manager Puppy so happy to be with a married woman?" "I haven't divorced yet," I deliberately teased him. I thought he would turn into a crazy little lion, but he just kept looking at me, which made me a bit uncomfortable. Then he suddenly held my hands tightly, leaned down, and kisses fell on my body one by one. "You are my goddess, not anyone's wife." I didn't say anything, but my body cooperated with his actions very well. Looking at his pious appearance, I just thought fortunately that I hadn't told him about Keith drugging me. Because this time, I wouldn't let his hands be stained with blood again. On the day when the court session opened, Luna dressed up and sat in the spectator seats wearing sunglasses while Keith sat opposite. Now a month had passed since we filed for divorce. They had laid out their plans long ago, but I also knew them like the back of my hand. However, I still had to pretend to be in a terrible mess. Fortunately, because the divorce was advanced, Puppy wasn't affected by the disputes within the family group and had been staying with me all the time. We were indulging ourselves in the room. I put my computer on his chest muscles, touched his waist, and read the divorce documents between Keith and me. It was also at this time that I learned that Puppy had studied law in college. Mr. Keith has provided a piece of photo evidence here, proving that Ms. Yvonne had malicious acts of cheating during the marriage, specifically having physical affairs with multiple men, which has caused great harm to Mr. Keith's mind. It has been verified by the court to be true. Does Ms. Yvonne have anything to state? I took a look at Keith's confident look and Luna's smug look and said calmly, the person who helped them fabricate and synthesize those fake photos is already outside the court. I request that he appear in court as a witness. Keith's face turned pale in an instant. In my previous life, I had no warning about this matter. Keith had found people in the court in advance. Although I denied it several times and asked them to verify the authenticity of the photos again, this matter was still confirmed in court. And because I cursed the judge for being unfair in court, I was dragged out of the court and given an additional administrative penalty. But this time, Keith didn't know that the person who made those fake photos for him was introduced by me behind the scenes. When Luna saw the person she had dealt with really walking in from the entrance, she couldn't sit still in her seat and suddenly stood up, starting to scold me incoherently. Judge, she's a slut. Those things are all true. Judge, you really can't let her go. The passers-by sitting beside and listening couldn't sit still either. It was obvious that she had something to do with Keith. Who is this woman? She's so excited. Yeah, it's none of her business that someone's husband and wife are getting divorced. Could she be the mistress? She looks like one to me. Otherwise, why would she be so excited? I took advantage of the situation and asked the judge to investigate the relationship between Luna and Keith. The judge colluded with Keith and originally intended to cover it up, but the onlookers couldn't hold back long ago and began to chatter and discuss the fairness of the court. As a result, Luna was also dragged into this matter. And I provided countless photos of them. After all, after I left, Luna couldn't wait to move into our house and I had left a pinhole camera there. With these photos, Keith was judged to have cheated and at the same time the crime of providing false evidence was confirmed. Not only did he have no advantage in the division of property, but he also had to take back the cars and luxury goods he had secretly bought for Luna. Keith adopted the tactic of retreating in order to advance and wanted to end the divorce quickly. He came to me after the first day of the court session. Yvonne, I'm sorry about Luna's matter. But I'm the one in charge of this company. How about giving me the company and I can give you a bit more property? Sure. Keith once again showed an appearance as if he had me in his grasp. Giving me a little money and taking away a company that was on the rise, why not? Unless you and Luna kowtow to me 100 times and admit your mistakes. When I said this, Luna walked out from behind the door. Yvonne, don't be delusional. If you don't obediently listen to Keith, believe it or not, we won't divorce and we'll wear you down. I was just about to curse back when the bodyguard in disguise beside me had already stepped forward and slapped Luna. He had a camera and earphones on him and was following Puppy's orders. Yvonne, how dare you? Don't slander people. I don't know this big brother. It's none of my business that he's unhappy with you, the mistress. Keith helped Luna up. Looking at the strong and fierce-looking man, he didn't dare to fight back. At this time, a group of people in the spectator seats happened to pass by here. They cursed and threw things at Luna while walking. Keith and Luna fled in a panic and left in a hurry. On the second day, neither Keith nor Luna showed up in court. Because they were arrested and interrogated that night for embezzling company property. I waited for 3 months and finally waited until they had transferred enough money, enough to sentence them to pay back all the money they embezzled. Moreover, these pieces of evidence were recorded one by one. Until now, Keith still thought that this company could make them money without much effort. So in the face of the huge compensation, Keith chose to borrow money to pay the compensation and avoid going to prison. I fulfilled his wish and gave him the company, and then we divorced. However, when the Xingtian group withdrew its investment and liquidated, and all the employees resigned and followed me away, both Luna and Keith went crazy. Now they not only have to face huge debts but also have to pay the rent, water, and electricity bills for this shell company with a 3-year contract. Oh no. Before I left, I extended the contract for them to 20 years and increased the compensation tenfold. Yvonne, you're still too kind to them. If you had let me handle it, I would have made them 100 times more miserable. It was only at this time that I realized why both Luna and Keith seemed a bit crazy and desperate. It turned out that Puppy had tortured them a lot behind my back. Since I started handling the divorce, Puppy had secretly sent people to beat Keith and Luna several times. They just thought that they were Luna's enemies. Puppy hugged me from behind while I was eating and put his head on my shoulder, lazily telling me the ways to torture people. Putting myself in Keith and Luna's shoes, I listened with great interest, but still didn't let Puppy handle this matter. You're the boss of a listed company, not a member of the underworld. Do you still want to do business in the future? I asked Puppy to trust me and go handle the overseas affairs without worry. He finally agreed angrily. When he got up the next morning, he avoided me while packing his luggage. I suspiciously sneaked a peek at his things and found that my personal clothes were placed one by one in the innermost layer. I was just about to take them out when Puppy saw it and rushed over. Although he was a bit embarrassed, he said righteously, "I took them because I thought you didn't want these clothes anymore. After all, I'll be away for such a long time." I scolded Puppy for still being like a child, but still let him take those clothes and watched him get on the plane. When I secretly went to find Keith, he was being beaten up by debt collectors. I had investigated and found that Luna had already run away, but I always had her address and had been updating the address for those who wanted to find her. When Keith saw me coming, his eyes were full of hatred. "Are you thinking about why I'm still not dead?" Keith instantly felt guilty and didn't dare to look up at me anymore. "Perhaps, would you like to hear about Chloe's story?" When Keith heard this name, he raised his head in shock. I told Keith a story. 3 days later, news came from the neighboring city that Keith had stabbed Luna to death. 1 month later, he was still caught after fleeing. The court sentenced Keith to death with a 3-year reprieve. This is a belated story. I had never understood why Keith had drugged me and wanted to put me to death. It was not until I went to investigate Luna that I discovered another person, Chloe. Chloe jumped off a building and died in high school. Some people said that she committed suicide because of depression, while others said that she killed herself because of a breakup. There had never been an answer to her death. Looking back now, although we were not in the same high school at that time, I was her neighbor and we had some casual interactions. When she died, people around were talking about it. And the person I asked to investigate told me that Chloe was actually Luna's fraternal twin. Although the two didn't look exactly the same, they were quite similar. When Luna's mother gave birth to twins, the family's financial situation was not good, so she gave Chloe away. When Luna and Chloe met again, the family that fostered Chloe happened to have good luck and made a lot of money. Although Chloe didn't do well in her studies, she was going to be sent to study in a high school in the UK on the day before going abroad. On the day before going abroad, Chloe followed Luna to an abandoned tall building and then jumped off. Chloe's parents were the only ones who knew that Chloe had gone out with Luna. They knew that Chloe was looking forward to going abroad and wouldn't commit suicide at all. From this perspective, Luna was very likely to be the murderer. The reason why this matter had been hidden all along was that at the request of Luna's parents, Chloe's parents couldn't bear to ruin Luna's future when they saw Luna, who looked similar to their daughter. So to the outside world, Chloe committed suicide due to depression. I met Keith in college, but I didn't know that Keith had only been in a relationship with Chloe and didn't know Luna. And the person Keith had always loved the most was Chloe at the age of 17. He couldn't get over it for several years after that. So Chloe was Keith's first love. In fact, I went to find Luna before I went to find Keith. Luna looked at me and said that Keith might have really loved me, but unfortunately, he lost his passion after getting married and wanted to find a new lover. And in Luna's opinion, when she happened to get in touch with Chloe's former boyfriend and found that he had become generous with his money and was quite wealthy, the only downside was that he had a wife. So when Luna cried and told Keith that I had bullied his first love, Chloe, and finally caused her to jump off the tall building, he decided to ruin me and be with Luna, who resembled his first love, that is, her sister. After all, she was Chloe's biological sister. How could Keith have thought that it was his biological sister who wove the lies and killed her younger sister with her own hands? I showed Keith a lot of evidence and also went to find Chloe's parents. Keith went crazy when he saw that evidence. Now Keith had nothing left, and he couldn't believe that the person who had ruined him was Luna. So he chose to perish together with Luna. While I was anxiously waiting for Puppy to come back in China, Puppy's mother came to find me. I thought she had come to give me money to make me leave her son. But to my surprise, she came to beg me. She gave me a medical diagnosis report. It turned out that Puppy didn't go abroad to deal with group disputes but to receive treatment. Over the years, he had been undergoing this treatment on and off. It was a kind of electroshock therapy, during which he would be completely unconscious. It turned out that in my previous life, he wasn't dealing with any disputes but was in a coma. His mother told me, when he's sober, he would never agree to do it. Because it can make a person forget the most important thing to him. Only when his mental state is really bad can we force him to undergo this treatment. But over the years, he always forgets about you for a while and then remembers you again. No patient has ever been able to remember someone repeatedly like this for such a long time. This time when he went abroad for treatment, apart from the normal course of treatment, he has refused to continue. The doctor said that his mental state has improved a lot, but he will still suffer a lot if he refuses. Puppy's mother told me that Puppy actually had the tendency of antisocial personality. He was abducted and sold when he was young and suffered some abuse, which formed serious psychological trauma. However, after going to the Welfare Institute, he met me. I didn't dislike him and always played with him. I was like a faint ray of light, becoming his only hope and the way out that he wanted to find among countless pains and puzzles. To some extent, I also became a kind of mental illness for him. I flew abroad with Puppy's mother and came to a secluded hospital. The doctor told me that they had taken away everything related to me and that Puppy was in great pain now. When I opened the door of the room, Puppy was lying on the floor, scratching the wooden floor with his fingernails. His hands were covered with blood and his expression was distorted. When he saw me, he was stunned for a moment, then hid his bloody hands and showed me a smile. I walked over and hugged him, and kissed him on the lips. I gently held his injured hands, and our blood mingled together. Puppy's mother said that Puppy actually still didn't believe that I would like him, so he didn't dare to let me know the truth and didn't dare to shatter this beautiful dream. There was still another way to cure Puppy, which was to love him completely, so that the once faint light that he constantly chased after could fill his whole heart. In a trance, I remembered the summer many years ago. I was crying bitterly on the seat because I was parting with my best friend. When I turned my head, Puppy was standing beside me, holding tissues, my favorite lollipops, and jasmine flowers. After going through so many twists and turns, who would have known that after a lifetime, I would choose that summer when I was 17 again. This time, I'm willing to spend a long time to heal the person who once protected me.